2 years ago, the path took a sharp turn and descended into a deep valley surrounded by high hills with limited sunlight. The province shut down, schools closed, shops shut, traffic still, and we all had to learn Zoom. We stayed inside, scrolling endlessly on our phones, shocked at freezer trucks full of the dead in New York City, horrified by outbreaks in local nursing homes, fearful of this unknown virus. We celebrated healthcare workers, waved at our loved ones through windows, and tried to figure out how to buy groceries online. We worried briefly about toilet paper supplies and began to say, "You're on mute," 20 times a day. And we've been down in the valley ever since. The valley's never been as narrow as in the first days. In time, it began to widen. The sky grew larger. We came out of our homes and enjoyed the company of a few others. We took a few deep breaths, and then we put on masks and kept them on. We saw cases surge and surge again. The valley deepened as we returned to a shutdown of schools and stores. The vaccines brought hope and waiting lists. We got in line and hoped for Pfizer. We got our first shot, and then our second shot, and we breathed a little easier. The valley widened and the sky grew larger. We came out of our homes and we sat on patios and started taking trips when we could. Traffic came back. We came back. Then new variants arose and we got back in line for a booster. We shut down, sort of, and stayed home again, sort of. And most of us kept our masks on. And now, 2 years from that first time that we turned inward, the path seems to be rising out of the valley and back into the familiar landscape of home. I'm not sure we're at the end yet, but I do hope with all of my heart that we are at the beginning of the end. And I know some of us cannot wait to get out of the valley, longing for open plains and endless possibility, eager to get to all that deferred activity. The valley's horizon has just been too limited, missing big crowds and new places. And some of us have found we kind of liked valley living, nestled into home, enjoying that slower pace. We set aside some responsibilities and found our souls expanded with the extra room. Life got better the less time we spent in cars. We found out just how good TV shows have gotten. And then others of us have found ourselves diminished by all the isolation, the time lost, the people lost, longing for human touch. We are less than what we were. And while we've all been down in the valley together, we've not all had the same pandemic. We've been through it together, but together at that distance, each on our own little Zoom screen, so much unseen by the camera. Each of us has our own story to tell of living in the valley. And this morning, 2 of our members have agreed to share their pandemic experiences with us. And we're going to hear first from Brenda Poole.
Good morning. I've been working for Peel Public Health as a health promoter for 16 years, involved in a variety of projects. I've designed an electronic survey to capture feedback from students completing a food handling training program and then writing up the reports. I'm currently producing a staff newsletter, but I'm doing this for about 6 or 7 years. I've played the part of a doctor in role-playing exercises to help teach inspectors how to talk to doctors about the rabies vaccine. But nothing has prepared me for working in public health during a public health emergency. When I was seconded on February the 25th, 2020 to the emergency response, I had to put aside my regular duties. For the first few days, one thing I did was track the number of COVID cases worldwide for a doctor's bulletin. Back then, the cases were over there. Besides China, there were cases in Italy. There were 29 deaths then. 2 years later, it's been 157,000. In Iran, South Korea, Japan, and Singapore. But on March the 5th, 2020, I was literally tapped on the shoulder to come to an emergency meeting. The first reported case had been confirmed in Peel. A week later, the Divas, UCM's women's group, met at Heather Epps' place. I remember Kathy Scott saying she'd be comfortable continuing to meet in our homes as long as we sat far apart from each other. But I wasn't so sure that we could continue meeting in person. During a meeting a day or two earlier, the communication specialist read out a tweet from Stephen Lecce's office, the education minister. "We are considering extending March break by an additional 2 weeks. No way," we shrieked. "They can't do that." Well, yes, they did. At work, we were still having huddles, team meetings. We were clustered around the photocopier, which seemed so strange we did that then. Someone tugged at my sleeve and I backed away from her. I was uncomfortable. She was within 6 feet of me. I decided then I would work from home before we even got the official word that we could do that. Lucky for me, we had gotten laptops only the previous fall. Otherwise, I was told I would have had to come into the office. When I spoke with my sister, it was amazing to compare our different work experiences. She found comfort in the regularity of going into her office, her husband's surveying company, and then it was pretty well continual work as usual for her. I, on the other hand, I was working from home. I had no monitor for 7 months. I was working on a laptop on the kitchen counter. I finally set up a better place later at Thanksgiving 2020. I was doing completely new work. I had a new group of employees to work with, most of whom were not inspectors. One of my first major tasks, and actually just until this past week I was doing, was updating the website content for restaurants, hairdressers, and swimming pools, places that are inspected by public health. It was absolutely mind-numbing trying to keep up with the constantly changing regulations and to decipher the goobly-goop language that the province uses. Most of the provincial announcements seem to happen around 3:30 on Friday afternoons, adding to the pressure of updating the website content. Sometimes I was just stuck. I was unable to form a coherent thought. My supervisor and I figured out that we were experiencing some type of brain fog. Also, just until last week, there was a restriction on vacations for staff. At first, we weren't even allowed to take any days off. Eventually, there was a limit of 3 months at a time. We could request maybe 10 days or 15 days. One source of comfort working from home has been my dog, Finn, who I had to put down recently. It's often been the highlights of the day to walk with him and safely chat with my neighbors outdoors. Even though my secondment ended last summer, I'm back working with inspectors again. I'm still working at home. The pace hasn't slowed, and I'm so looking forward to some time off to rest this summer.
As Brenda has shared, for some, COVID has brought new challenges, having to be adaptable and flexible, meeting ever-changing scenarios. For some, it's been an exciting time out of time, having to reimagine how we spend our days, having to do things differently, forced out of our regular routines. But all of these challenges and changes take their toll. The one thing I've heard over and over again during the past 2 years is that people are tired. The pandemic has been exhausting, most especially for healthcare and frontline workers, but for all of us at some level. As much as we enjoy challenge and change, humans also crave routine and habits. Things staying the same creates security. It allows us to get comfortable, take some things for granted, to direct our energy where we want it to go. The pandemic has brought 2 years of uncertainty. And like the rain of the past few days, uncertainty sets us on boggy ground. It's a slog to get through it. Every step is an effort. Never knowing if the kids were going to be in school or at home, online, going months without hugging a friend, unable to travel overseas to visit loved ones, anxiously watching the number of hospitalizations has meant that at times just getting through each foggy, soggy day has been a triumph of the will. And we've done it. And we kept on doing it throughout the last 2 years. So it's no wonder we're exhausted, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually too. We have found the limits of ourselves, the limits of the principles we hold so dear, the limits to our values. I've seen with sorrow that it's easy to be kind when my life is relatively stress-free, but so much harder under pressure. I've struggled with compassion fatigue, with the effort of being open to understanding people concerned about vaccines, with truly hearing the fears of the protest convoy. I've had my share of othering people who refuse to accept facts, who seem to have fallen prey to manipulation. And it's been so easy to dismiss, to disparage, to even hate those who think differently than me. And it's been a hard lesson for me to learn, to see just how easy it was. When I'm tired, scared, uncertain, how easy it is to find someone to blame. I've had to work hard to keeping my heart open, to be respectful while holding boundaries, to channel my anxiety without harming others, to try and hear the grains of truth in the experiences of people who think so differently than I do. We're not the same as we were before the pandemic. We've grown and changed because time does not stand still. So as we come back into a society with no restrictions, it is an adjustment, trying to bring ourselves back in alignment, figuring out what can stay on Zoom and what needs to be in person, seeing how far ahead we can reliably plan. We need time to let all of our being catch up, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. We're all in different spaces. Each of us, in our own way, needs to figure out which parts of us need to catch up. For me, I need to wait for my brain to accept this recent update. And in doing so, I turn to self-compassion, letting good enough be good enough, and keeping my focus on the essentials. Being here helps me, soothing my spirit as the chalice flame flares with the light of all of you. And I take strength knowing that this is a vital spiritual community, that our principles, our values matter. The world needs what we believe, what we hold dear. More people need to hold these things dear if we are to have peace in this world. And I hope that being part of this community has helped you too through the past 2 years. And I'd like to invite up Shirley Dickens to hear about her stories from the pandemic.
When Fiona mentioned in the Shining Chalice about asking for stories, I said, I have a story. And then as I got to write it, it got shorter and shorter. So, mine is about the losses and of the loved ones from UCM during the past 2 years. And as I said, as I lit a candle, there has been about 10, which is really an incredible number. In my many years as a member here, we have never had so many deaths, mostly well-aged people. And fortunately, none had COVID, or not that we know of. Fiona coordinated celebration of life with technical assistance beyond belief, providing meaningful services on Zoom. The advantages of Zoom was family and friends from far and near could participate in the service. And the disadvantage I felt afterwards, long afterwards, was the limited connections with family and friends here, as we would have had with a service in the church. And now I'm glad we're back together again so we can touch and feel each other and just share our joys and sorrows. Thank you.
That was very succinct of you, Shirley. It has been hard to have so many losses while being together but apart on Zoom. And I think the pandemic has cost many of us a great deal. Illness and death, isolation and loneliness, learning the limitations of ourselves and our values. It's been a long, exhausting time, and we're still recovering, even those of us who had relatively easy and even joyful pandemics experiences. Because no time is all bleak. And so these past 2 years have also brought gifts. Good and wonderful things have happened. Generous kindness has appeared all over the world. The convoy protests notwithstanding, our death rate from COVID is less than 1/3 of the death rate in the United States. And that is due to the fact that we did stay home. We are wearing masks and we've gotten vaccinated. And we did this to take care of one another. We chose to look after the vulnerable. This is a great gift. And there have been many smaller, more personal gifts. Many parents have, most of the time, loved the increased time with their children. More people have pets now, enjoying that loving energy of animals. And some of you have discovered how resilient you are, how well you've coped when faced with great change, and we have all learned Zoom. And I know for me, the pandemic has brought some clarity, a sense of what really matters most. There's been the gift of deeper connection with loved ones, the gift of creativity born out of necessity. And these are good spiritual values, clarity, love, and creativity. I am grateful to have rediscovered them during this pandemic. And I'm even grateful to have learned the limits of my compassion, to know what I need to do to maintain my sense of the inherent worth of all beings, what I need to do to keep myself grounded in the principles. I hope that during the struggles of the past 2 years, you too have found gifts in this time, and may you cherish them. Today's the Pandemiversary of our first service on Zoom. And it's fitting today that we have Joanne here because she was also playing in that first service online as we arrived fearful and confused to this new way of connecting and of the unknown virus. And now here we are, in person and online, in this new multi-platform world. Sometimes still fearful and confused, but still together, caring for each other. And I looked back at that service, a global deep breath, when I had no idea what to say in that moment, still in shock by that shift to the shutdown. And I suggested that we use spiritual practices to ground ourselves, that we hold fast to our UU principles, and that we lean into the light. And as we head into a world altered by this global pandemic, facing a war in Europe that was unimaginable only months ago, I'll share the same words I ended with that day. We can stabilize ourselves through spiritual practices and living our values. Look for ways to help, lift up beauty, look for the hope. When it's dark, lean into the light. There is grief, there is suffering, yes. And there is spring, a time of life beginning anew, of the irresistible flush of green growth and longer days. Spring has come again as it has for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years and will for thousands more. Life is long and we will find our way through the troubles together. This child's community will be here for you. Let spring enter your heart and carry you into the light. Tend to your spirit. Live your UU principles. Lean in toward the light. So say we all.